Hi everyone, I'm your host Max Chestnut here at PTI on the SBC Seattle channel. I'm here with co-hosts William Robinson and Michael Franz. And we've got a couple of things to talk about here today, guys, but the first one I'm wondering about is, what's your all's pick for the NL East?
I'm going to have to go with the New York Mets. With veteran leadership in the form of manager Buck Showalter, who I feel like he's just a better Tony La Russa because he has the same veterancy that La Russa has, but he doesn't tend to make the same mistakes. And also, the New York Mets have an elite pitching staff with a great 1-2 punch in the form of Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom, who's just returned from a rehab stint. Now, not only this, but the Mets' run differential and general lineup is better than the Atlanta Braves with a plus 98 instead of, I believe, 80 for the Braves. And finally, on top of all of this, New York is more willing to spend in free agency, and they have more money on account of being in a larger market in the form of New York.
Yeah, I'm going to have to disagree with you there. I think the Braves' rotation is better because they have so many pieces in Morton and Strider and all these pieces. Their whole rotation is good. But for the Mets, you have deGrom and Scherzer, and then it kind of falls off. And for the lineup side, Austin Riley has been absolutely incredible. He has been like the best hitter in baseball. While the Mets have Pete Alonso, who's been pretty good, but not as good as Riley. And the Braves do a very good job at the trade deadline by picking up all of these not big names, but solid names to help them make it through the postseason like they did last year.
I feel as though, Atlanta only won 88 games last year, although this isn't exactly the best of things I could bring up, given that New York completely choked in the second half. However, I feel like Atlanta has some pieces, but I think you're underrating New York's pitching staff beyond Scherzer and deGrom. I forget his name, Taijuan Walker. He may not be a big name, but he is actually a really solid starter. And Spencer Strider, you mentioned, he's a great pitcher. That's just undeniable. I feel like he's probably the Braves' ace if it's not Max Fried. And actually, these pitching staffs, the stats show they're very close. Coming into today, the Mets have a 3.35 combined ERA, while the 3.35, my bad. The Mets have a combined 3.35 combined ERA compared to the Braves' 3.38.
Yeah. I forgot about Max Fried. He's probably their ace, I would say, over Strider. He's been very good, and also staying off the injury list is huge because the Mets have had that problem at least in the past, and deGrom just made his first start yesterday, so you can see he was on the injury list for all of last year.
Yes.
All of this year.
And I'm of the opinion that, at the very least, New York has the pitching staff to make it through a 7-game series, yes, in the form of the NLCS or the World Series if they make it. And although I will give you this, Atlanta is definitely a wild card team. There's no question. I think they might even go in as the first seed for the wild card, at least, so 4th overall. Not only this, but the Mets lineup tends to create more runs than the Braves one does. For example, this is what I mentioned with the run differential earlier. They have an 18-run advantage over Atlanta. And Pete Alonso, I feel like his biggest strength is that he creates tons of runs. Now, Ty France, going into the All-Star break, was considered one of the best first basemen in baseball. But when I compared him with Pete Alonso, it turns out Pete Alonso creates even more runs than Ty France does. And I really think that means something.
So in this way that we're talking about how the Mets are just kind of big names, but then you feel that they have some undervalued names, and that you feel that applies to the hitting lineup as well.
Yes, it does.
Nice. And the other topic, you mentioned earlier, you felt that the Braves won out big in trade day, but who was the biggest winner of trading this
Personally, I think the Nationals were getting all those prospects and names from the Padres was huge because obviously they're not going to win the World Series in the next 3 years. They weren't anyways with Soto because they didn't have any other big pieces. And getting Abrams and Mackenzie Gore and Hassel and Wood and even Luke Voigt, that was really big, I think, for their farm system.
I'll have to say the Washington Nationals are definitely one of the biggest winners out of the trade deadline, but I don't think they're the biggest. I think I'm still going to have to give that title to good old Slam Diego out west. Now, getting not only Juan Soto, but also Josh Bell in the same trade for a team that's currently contending for the playoffs at the moment, just those two names, I think, would probably have been enough to catapult them into World Series contention, but they didn't even stop there. They got, they shipped off Eric Hosmer to Boston to be replaced by, I just said Josh Bell. And my memory fails me. Brandon Drury, yes, thank you. They got Brandon Drury from Cincinnati, who's been one of the hottest hitters in baseball recently, hitting quite a bit over 300 actually. I think he's around the 310s, 320s at the moment. And Brandon Drury, he can play tons of positions. He can fill tons of holes. He's a huge utility player for San Diego. He can play outfield. He can play second. He can play third. And all of this is good enough to put them in World Series contention, and they don't even have their biggest superstar, Fernando Tatis Jr. So when he comes back from the injury list, the San Diego Padres are a team you might have to look out for, even in 2023 for the division, as one of the best teams in the NL, if not in baseball, due to this trade deadline.
Well, I'll just bring up the smaller point is how does San Diego, they've won all these big names, Josh Bell, Juan Soto, but then they've also lost a lot of players with that trade. So how do they reform with that? Do they get that team dynamic working faster?
Because also for the future, the Padres, they'll be good, but then if they end up not re-signing Juan Soto, which I think they will, based on the amount of prospects that they gave up and all the players, they won't be the best team in baseball for a long time. Like from 2025 to like 2030 probably, it's going to be Nationals maybe the better team by these prospects.
Perhaps, however, I believe that coming out of the trade deadline, I feel like putting a team in World Series contention now is just going to give me a little bit more favor. And not only this, but some of the best teams in baseball have rather poor minor league systems. The Houston Astros, who were in the World Series last season, their minor league system was ranked almost dead last season, 29th. And I feel as though while the Nationals will definitely be a force in the NL for years to come, they aren't going to be one for a few years. And I think that's the real crux of my argument, why San Diego's walking out with the biggest win.
Okay.
Well, that's been quite an interesting segment. Remember, you can catch us every Wednesday here on SBC Seattle. Checking out, I'm Max Chestnut.